continue looking at the definition of infinite provided by gotquestions.org. Infinite simply means without limits. Yes, that's true, but how do you know this applies to God? I mean, really, even if God exists and really is infinite, how could you possibly actually know that he was in fact infinite? As far as I'm aware, there are exactly 0 ways to confirm this. When we refer to God as infinite, we generally refer to him with terms like omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence. Okay, so in this case, infinite is actually a catch-all for all the impressive traits you want to attribute to this God? This statement doesn't really do anything to help me understand what you really mean. I understand omniscience to mean having all knowledge, and omnipotence meaning having all power, and omnipresence to mean presently occupying absolutely all locations, which I must say this seems to conflict with the spaceless attribute right away. But the implication of their statement is that infinite equals omnipotence plus omnipresence plus omniscience. It seems like an odd definition. Why doesn't it at least also mean omnibenevolent? Or is that where you draw the line and tell God this far and no further? If you aren't willing to follow certain attributes to their conclusions, you might start thinking about crossing a few of these off the list. Because God is infinite, he is also said to be transcendent. Does something being infinite necessitate that it is also transcendent? How does this follow? There are infinite numbers, but does that mean they are transcendent? The universe could be infinite. Would that make it transcendent? Of course, they are using transcendent with a particular meaning here, I think. I believe they mean that transcendent equals supernatural. Maybe I'm wrong, but when they say transcendent, I think they are referring to real things beyond our universe. I don't want to strawman them though, so I won't push this. It is hard to pinpoint what believers really mean. If you try to narrow the focus and get a concrete definition, they suddenly slip into another term which broadens the whole thing again. Because God is infinite, he is also said to be transcendent, which simply means that God is exceedingly far above creation and is both greater than creation and independent of it. Why is it that they keep using the word simply as a preface to their explanations? Is it really simple? No, I don't think it is, and the answers just seem to muddy the waters to me. Am I being unreasonably stubborn here? When it comes to these issues, I just don't think it is honest to accept these things without scrutiny. So let me recap here. Infinite equals transcendent equals above / greater / independent of creation. Okay, whatever, let's just get through this. What this means is that God is so infinitely above and beyond us and our ability to fully comprehend that, had he not revealed himself, we would not know or understand what he is like. So all of this to say that God is beyond our ability to comprehend him. This is to say that God is honestly a nonsensical idea. But don't walk away yet, there's more. He revealed himself. Otherwise, you wouldn't understand what he is like. This implies that because he has revealed himself, that we do understand what he is like. But isn't that exactly the opposite of what they said previously? Am I this dense? They said it was simple. I get that they are using this revelation word as a get-out-of-jail-free card, but that doesn't do anything to clarify what they have been saying. The last thing I want to say here is that saying that one attribute is a result of being infinite does nothing really to tell me any more about what you mean exactly by infinite. At this point, I give up on their definition of God's infinite attribute. I don't think they or anyone else really has a clue what they mean when they say that God is infinite. Sure sounds cool though. I also want to go into that last bit they said about how though we are finite and God is infinite, we can know Him because He revealed Himself to us. This goes into what I said at the beginning when I made the "but Jesus" comment. First, I want to go over more problems with attributes, but we will get there eventually. Let's look at those two attributes that came up as a result of their definition of infinite. I already talked about the idea of God being spaceless, or on the outside of space, which seems to me that He would still be in some kind of space. How can God also be omnipresent then? God is here right now, right? Well, maybe not. I think we need 2 or 3 gathered in His name. Apparently, in some sense of the word, He is here, there, and everywhere. But don't for a second think that He is in space, because He is outside of space, remember? In my Christian days, I might answer this by saying, yeah, well, God is spirit, so that means He's everywhere, and He just isn't physically here. At this point, I would have to ask, what is a spirit? I think that for any explanation you were to come up with, I would have to think you were just talking out your infinite. Let's say you won me over. Spirits are a thing, God is a spirit. The spirit doesn't exist inside our space, but it can influence it from outside space. And it observes, or maybe just knows what's going on inside space. Okay. So God is now spaceless and also occupying all space concurrently? No, I don't think so. How does this work? Can anyone give me some sensible explanation? Would this explanation be propped up by equally untenable solutions? At what point in this unfounded list do you start gaining confidence in it? Let's get back to the original list from the beginning of all this and look over the perfects. Perfectly wise, perfectly just, perfectly loving being. Number 1. I'm wondering how anyone was able to determine what perfection in these areas actually was. It is quite a claim to say that someone is perfectly wise. But would an all-knowing being really be wise? He might know what the best and worst things are, but who or what is to say he takes the wise action? Are you wise because you know something, or are you wise based on your actions? To classify someone as wise is to make a judgment about them. What standard is this judgment based on? Even if this God really is perfectly wise, how can any human ascertain this to be the case? Unless you have the means to do so and can present your findings, you really ought to cross this one off the list. Number 2. Again, we come upon an attribute that requires a judgment, but this one is compounded in that we are talking about justice. Perfectly just? Honestly, this one seems a lot like filler. If perfect justice is determined by using whatever justice God doles out as perfection, well, we really aren't saying much here, are we? What really makes it perfect? Perfection, like beauty, is a comparison with a concept. If my idea of justice was some vicious thing, so for example I burned in hellfire all those who refused to worship me as their God, and I personally considered that perfect, then as far as I'm concerned, that would be perfect justice. Now, for some reason, I don't conceptualize that as perfect justice. But does that mean that God's justice is not perfect? According to my own standard, yes. This is the issue, though. There is no transcendental perfection. It is only an idea that exists in our minds. If God's idea is displayed correctly in the Bible, I am forced to say that I think I would have a very warped idea of justice. Number 3. Perfectly loving. How sweet. The sweetest, in fact. So what is perfect love? As a believer, can you really possibly know? You could produce a list of things and say, this is perfect love. But then, aside from that being your own conception of love, wouldn't you also say that the love God has is far above and beyond the list that you came up with? Again, perfection is a concept. And if you made that list, that would be your ideal version of love. But what makes it perfect in the absolute sense that you intend? You couldn't possibly fully understand God's love if we take on the perspective of the believer. So in what way can you classify it as perfect? Does God encompass the abstract concept of perfect love? How are you able to make this claim without being able to capture in whole an abstract which cannot be fully realized? Maybe perfect love more reasonably means the most that a human can conceptualize. I still don't see how you would have any way to verify the claim. What comparisons are you making between your conception of God and your conception of perfect love? It seems like so many things on this list are like a person saying they have captured a photo of an abstract concept and have framed it on a wall in a place that all can come and be amazed. Yet the image is never really presented in reality. Help me out, Aquinas. Shed some light on this for me, would you?
The truth of our faith becomes a matter of ridicule amongst the infidels if any Catholic, not gifted with the necessary scientific learning, presents as dogma what scientific scrutiny shows to be false.
Well, obviously, what I'm saying here is not about scientific scrutiny. But what you've said here can also apply if we just replace the word scientific with rational. I don't exactly intend to show anything I'm talking about here to be out and out false either. Simply, unsubstantiated.